is Moses Udasumikwa. I'm the president of the Rwandan community in San Antonio. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you who came from far to the Alamo City, San Antonio. God bless you for coming. It's my honor to welcome Her Excellency the Ambassador, who decided to spare time on her busy schedule to come and be with us tonight. Again, it's my honor to welcome all the distinguished panelists and all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to hand this mic to our moderator, Carl Hino, if I pronounced it right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Moses. It's such a pleasure to be in your city. And it is just wonderful to be here for such an important event, particularly during Dream Week. Rwanda really mirrors a lot of what Martin Luther King stood for. And so it's really wonderful to have this event. I am so honored to be introducing Ambassador Matilda Mukantabana. She is the ambassador in the US, but also non-resident ambassador in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. Before being an ambassador, she was a professor of history and a lecturer on social work. And she is in Washington. If I can go beyond the bio, which I know a lot of you have read, she is one of the most loved ambassadors in Washington. I'm from Washington. I can definitely say, for many of us who work on Africa, we consider her the ambassador for the continent, not just for Rwanda, because she is so loved. She is now the deputy dean and the go-to ambassador for us. So with that, we are so thrilled to have you come and give the talk here. Please welcome Ambassador Mukantabana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol, for the kind introductions. Good afternoon, honorable distinguished guests and friends. Let me seize this opportunity to express, first of all, my deepest gratitude to the organizers of Dream Week for including us in this year's celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King life. I thank especially Mr. Shokali Nakopodia and his team at Dream Week, the city of San Antonio, as well as the Rwandan community of San Antonio, under the leadership of Moses Rudasunikwa. It's also an honor to share the podium with Yehoyada Mbangukira, who is the president of United States Rwandan Community Abroad, and with our eminent panelists. Dear friends and compatriots, it's an honor and a privilege to be here and to partner with Dream Week. We are here in unity to celebrate a great man, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, whose life trajectory has left a big imprint in our hearts and whose philosophy has inspired the generations all over the world. He was a normal being, human being, who did extraordinary things. Even though Dr. King's life was cut short, his guiding light will forever shine on our world in our pursuit of justice, human rights, and brotherly love. Dr. King consecrated his life in the fight against poverty, racism, and war. By doing so, he literally gave his life to make the world a more just and equal place. Ladies and gentlemen, King's legacy is timeless and knows no bound. As our world grapples with terrorism, violence, and intolerance, his message of peace and love resonates even stronger. Our generation and future generations should take heed of Dr. King's numerous messages, including his call for nonviolent resistance, in relation to unequal political rights and his push for economic freedom. There's no better example of the power of his philosophy than the politics of my country. 27 years ago, Rwanda was reduced to ashes in the most vicious violence inflicted by men to fellow men. The genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda destroyed the economic, political, and social fabric of the nation. Many have predicted that Rwanda will become a failed state forever, but we defy the odds. The eminent panelists will give you a little glimpse on the journey our country has taken to emerge from the abyss of destruction. We designed a roadmap and made transformative choices that are still guiding us today, and that can be summarized in 3 words: unity, accountability, and thinking big. Our rebirth was not a return to what was there before. It meant reimagining a better country, a better world. And Rwanda wasn't coming from an empty drum. To rebuild our nation, Rwanda drew from the wells of wisdom imparted by our ancestors. The homegrown solutions allowed us to start our trajectory to healing, recovery, and growth. The highest priority of our leadership in rebuilding our nation was to break the cycle of violence. The ability to transcend personal suffering for a higher good is what made Rwanda defy early predictions of doom. Now it's a country governed by the rule of law, where unity, reconciliation have allowed people to come together to build a cohesive and prosperous nation. The notion of forgiveness is at the core of our being and has become our duty. Martin Luther King Jr. philosophy strongly resonates with us in our constant quest for solutions through dialogue, consensus politics, and inclusiveness. These concepts have been institutionalized and delivered through our several homegrown solutions, such as the national dialogue that takes place in Rwanda every December, and many socioeconomic programs that help all our citizens to have better and productive lives. Today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is most often remembered as a crusader for racial justice, but not too many people talk about economic justice. But those struggles were inextricably intertwined for the civil rights leader who knew that the inseparable twin of racial justice was economic injustice. As President Kagame said, our struggle is to liberate ourselves from poverty and achieve development for all. Our politics are centered giving everyone dignity, seeing value in each other, and working together to achieve our common goal. Today Rwanda is a place of peace, where Rwandans and non-Rwandans find a place fit to do business and raise their families. We are citizen-centered country, least corrupt, and among other states, among safest states. It's a country that plays its parts in the region, in Africa, in the world, as highlighted by the 2 examples I'm going to give below. It's a place that finds room for refugees and others escaping violence, as it was recently the case with the all-girls schools from Afghanistan that selected Rwanda to be their temporary home while things are being sorted out at home. Similarly, with the help of US National Academy of Science, academicians and scientists from Afghanistan selected Rwanda as their host country. They are now working side by side with their counterparts at the National University of Rwanda. These groups chose Rwanda because of our values, not because we are the richest or the biggest country in the world. It's also a country that strongly collaborates with neighbors to wage peace, as was the case with the joint efforts with the government of Mozambique that invited Rwanda on a bilateral basis to quell the terrorist insurgency that had wreaked havoc in the northern part of Mozambique for more than 4 years. Our peacekeepers also are not merely peacekeepers, but also peace builders, they have been rated all over the world, whether it was in South Sudan, whether it's in Central African Republic, whether in Haiti. On the case of Mozambique, we now together have been able to allow people to safely return home to their land after more than 4 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the road to justice, to equality, and to unity is never smooth. It's a road that today and future generations might take. My country and its leadership have a vision for a better country, a society built on fundamental values on peace, human equality, and freedom. I'm happy that the young people are taking the baton and are helping to build our country brick by brick. I look forward to exchanging with you all, and as we gather here today, let's hold hands and commit to further Dr. King's legacy. Let's make peace a global priority and echo his dedication to pursue liberty and justice for all. And also I call you to stand with Rwanda as we forge ahead and we strive to achieve peace and prosperity for our people. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. So we have next a video from an interview that I did with Dr. Emmanuel Nibishaka, who is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at the Rwandan Governance Board. Unfortunately, he was hoping to be here with everyone, but he was not able to come due to restrictions with COVID and travel. So we have the next best thing, having him join us by video. So with that, if you can play the video, please. And after that, we'll have our panel discussion.
I am so pleased to be here with Dr. Emmanuel Nibishaka, who is the Deputy CEO of the Rwandan Governance Board. And welcome.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be participating in this Dream Week event. Unfortunately that I am not with you in San Antonio, but nevertheless, it's a pleasure to be participating virtually and happy to be speaking with you now.
Yes, well, we are so happy to have you with us, even if it's virtually. You know, the whole idea of Rwanda then and now, it really it strikes home with me, having been in Rwanda in the early years after the genocide and seeing it now. And I think it's hard to really understand just how amazing things are if you don't understand where you came from. I wonder if you could just paint a picture for us of what Rwanda looked like at the time that the government came into power after the genocide. What were they facing?
Thank you so much. As you said, it's really amazing to see how Rwanda looks like today. But looking back, as you said, it was like a country in a shambles, a country which was at its knee, if I may use the term. And many political scientists and commentators used to call it a failed state. Why did they say that? Because you see, a country that has experienced the genocide, that took over 1 million of its people. So the legacy of that genocide alone was horrifying for Rwanda. But not only that, the genocide ideology was still very, very active in Rwanda. And then there was a social mistrust among its people. And to that legacy of the genocide, there was also internal and external security challenges that was grappling the country. As you may remember, at the end of the genocide in 1994, we had over 2 million of our people who crossed borders to neighboring countries as refugees, but also we had elements of Interahamwe who had committed genocide and the former soldiers among those refugees. So those were all, committed to cause insecurity and to wage insurgents against Rwanda. But not only that, although we also had more than 8% of our population were either internal displaced person or refugees in neighboring countries. So with that, our life expectancy in Rwanda was at 29, and then integrate citizens as a active participants in their own development. That's how the idea of homegrown solutions came in, because the homegrown solutions have significantly contributed in the national reconstruction, being instrumental in uplifting many citizens from poverty, fostering unity and reconciliation and social cohesion, and boosting our economic development. So those homegrown solutions, if you allow me to proceed, were some of traditionally used solutions by our ancestors and Rwandans back then, and then that you had to adapt to the context of the post-1994, so that they can generate or provide forward-looking solution to the problem that we faced. I am sure there's a speaker that will be elaborating on homegrown solutions, but those homegrown solutions actually were like a milestone in what Rwanda is today.
You know, it's so true, because other places, they tend to look to the outside for the solutions. And Rwanda really looked internally at what it could find within its own resources. And I think that's really amazing. And one of the things that I think is also incredible is how you are so committed to measuring whether those solutions have been successful. And I'd love if you can talk about, sort of why you measure it, because usually others look to others to tell them how they're doing. And there you guys are saying, everyone's complimenting you, and you're saying, no, tell us what we did wrong because we want to improve. You're constantly looking for, where are the gaps so we can fill those gaps. And I think that's really amazing. So talk to us about the measurements that you do.
Okay, thank you so much, Carol. I think maybe before I tackle the measurement, I need to emphasize that the homegrown solutions I talked about culminated many things that generated or helped us to shape the development process that we are in, including the blueprint, our development blueprint that was known as Vision 2020, and now that has been replaced by the NST1, the National Strategy for Transformation, or Vision 2050. In that blueprint document, we identified some key priorities that provided us with the guiding tools for the future. And it's from those guiding tools that actually we are able to measure our success, or the gaps or the challenges that we are confronted with. So why do we measure? I think I share the same conviction as you said, that regular self-assessment is very, very essential in helping us to identify areas of improvement in a timely manner, so that we won't lose the momentum in building a better life for all. But we also view those assessments as an essential tool to revitalize accountable governance that Rwanda has chosen, because those tools, through those tools, we are able to tell where we are performing well and where we are still have some gaps, and so that we can devise appropriate measure to fill these gaps. So Rwanda Governance Board is mandated, among other things, to conduct applied research or applied governance research, so that we are able to provide recommendation to government to ensure service delivery, accountability, and sustainable development in a prosperity. And then, because of that mandate, that broad mandate, we developed some assessment tool to gauge the status of implementation of policies, but also the status of governance, the status of development in Rwanda. And the key publications or key assessment tools that we have include the Citizen Report Card. The Citizen Report Card is a, I will call it, if you are here at Rwanda Governance Board, we call it mainly like a public audit tool in which citizens provide feedback on service delivery. In the current National Strategy for Transformation, the target for citizen satisfaction towards service delivery is set at 90%. So we are looking at our citizens being satisfied by service delivery by 90% in the 2020, I mean in the 2024. So the Citizen Report Card, and we have been conducting those surveys on an annual basis, and to capture the performance of both public and the private sector in service delivery, but also to measure the level of citizen participation in the government program as well. So how do we do that with the CRC? We usually conduct it, it's a nationwide survey in which we involve around 11,000 households, and we send our researchers on the ground in each village, and then they will identify, using a sampling method, they identify households to participate in the survey, and then we will sit and analyze the response from the population, and they do its data analysis, and then do the publication. And through that publication, it's like a reflection of citizen perception or citizen satisfaction in the 16 sectors. And currently, we look at 16 sectors, including security, citizen participation, governance and trust and leadership, hygiene, justice, livestock, family welfare and health, social welfare, local administration, education, ICT, private sector, infrastructure, land and environment, and agriculture. You will understand that those are actually touching every aspect of life, and then citizens are able to give their inputs on how they perceive the services provided both by the government or public and private institutions. Another one, which is also very key, actually very key, is the Rwanda Governance Scorecard. And the Rwanda Governance Scorecard also has been a very, very essential tool that helps us to gauge the status of governance in all sectors in Rwanda. And the governance scorecard is also built on our national planning and strategic documents, mainly the Vision 2020 also, but now the NST1, but also the sector strategic plans. The national strategy for transformation set the tone at national level, but then those strategies at national levels are translated into more actionable goals and the goals and the priority areas, which we are able to triangulate into pillars. And pillars include the rule of law, political rights, civil liberty, participation and inclusiveness, security and safety, investing in human rights and social development, quality of service delivery, economic and corporate governance, as well as anti-corruption, transparency and accountability. And through those, we develop indicators and sub-indicators, and then we go in each institutions, and then we see the targets that were set for this particular year, and then we assess their performance vis-a-vis the target, and then we publish the results on an annual basis. And we use also indicators, some indicators from international indices, because those indicators we develop from our national planning documents, but we also borrow from international indices such as like the UN Development Index or the Mo Ibrahim happiness index and other index. I can't remember of the index that the Sustainable Development Index. All of them, we use them and we adapt them to the local context.
Rwanda. You know, one thing that I think is also really important to bring out is what happens when things don't go well. So if a department, if one of the ministries is not coming back very well in the survey, what happens to them?
Thank you very much, Carol. And that's very key in what we do. As you rightly put it, we at RGB we understand governance as accountability, transparency, and efficiency in deploying scarce resources that we have. And that's number one. Number two, we understand accountability as centered on citizen participation and inclusiveness. That's why we take the time to go to our citizens and to get their feedback, to get their perception, to get their inputs on what the government, on what the public, on what the private is doing for them. So their participation is very key in governance. So as to respond to your question on what we do when a particular department or a district is not doing what it's supposed to do, that's why in the second part of what His Excellency the President said, accountability, to remain accountable to ourselves. How do we become accountable to ourselves, and what do we do when things are not going according to what you have said to be? So regular assessments help us to respond to that. For RGB, when we conduct assessments, be it self-delivered assessments, be it citizen report card, be it the Rwanda governance scorecard, some of those reports are published, launched in public platform, but we give our reports to national parliament, both chambers, and then to the President of the Republic. And when the report is tabled in the national parliament, they have specific commissions that go through our report. And those commissions will look at issues that you have raised, look at gaps that you have raised, look at the recommendation, and then we will do the follow-up with relevant institutions that are supposed to be implementing those recommendations.
Pulled them, drifted them far apart. And there was nothing that was going to unify them or that would bind them together to be able to accomplish anything, let alone collectively as a nation, but also for themselves in the absence of hope. You expected them to individually be able to succeed. Because for any people to be able to embark on any communal project, for them to be able to venture out into for the purpose of any collective action, there must be enough social capital that runs their behavior. And here, the idea really behind this concept of social capital is that where you have social capital, physical proximity becomes possible. Proximity between individuals, physical proximity of people becomes possible. And then proximity will trigger interaction. They're able to interact because they're close to one another. And then interactions breeds collaboration, and collaboration lubricates trust, social trust, but also interpersonal trust. And out of trust sprouts a communal enterprise with major entrepreneurial projects that actually build a nation and the state. So in the wake of the genocide, none of that existed, and no pre-existing recipes or structures were in place to make it happen. And yet, all those people I just described were expected to hold hands up, singing Kumbaya, you can imagine, converging efforts toward one mission of rebuilding one Rwanda nation under God, indivisible, and justice for all. Not the church, not the art, not the national anthem, not even the flag. The flag was said to give them the impulse to achieve any of that. Nothing. But 28 years later, almost, you look at the remarkable work that the Unity and Reconciliation Commission, NURC, has done through persistent national dialogue, but also intelligent policies, resulting in hundreds of cases where the victims and the perpetrators live side by side again, live in homes that share a wall, homes divided by one wall, catching rainwater from the same fountain, trusting each other with their lives, and intermarriages happening with wonderful little Rwandans born out of those unions. I have made several of these incredible fellows in my research, and each time I meet them, it just eludes comprehension. But it also showcases the resilience of a people. And I can come back to this concept of resilience, what actually it means when you apply it in the context of Rwanda. But that's one point on the horizontal level, individual to individual dynamics, what was going on at the time. Vertically, though, because we're also speaking of governing those people and the state creating structural incentives for reconciliation, to govern that set of fractured people wasn't like anything seen in other places. It would have appeared mission impossible to take all those sensibilities, bring them together, and make it possible for them to even talk to each other, then patch their brokenness together and engineer a strong national cohesion and build a prosperous nation upon it. All that alongside the monumental and permanent stain printed by the genocide on the society. We don't have many comparable cases from which to deduct explanations on how countries actually would even begin to do it. But the Rwandan case, though, and I'll be done with this point here, it defies both logic and practice. But for one thing, we know that one factor made it possible, and that is the leadership. In the thick of this reconciliation quagmire, we see that the leadership that emerged was not just rational enough, not just acting out of emotions, but for all this time, the president of Rwanda has spearheaded this process with intelligence, with grit, with convictions, with principles and clarity in the manner that quickly resuscitated the state's order and appealed to both sides for coexistence in an effective way. For many students of Rwanda, and I would like to remind that it was actually, it's easy to forget that things could have gone further south had it not been for the authentic natural authority of the leadership, which preserved nationhood, the Rwandan civilization, and continue to keep it from going extinct. So I will take a break for the moment and then have two more points, one on the justice and then the Rwandan, this work abroad and beyond Rwanda that I can come back to later.
Thank you so much. And I think that one of the things that you said, yes, I love that you said mission impossible, because I think that's really what it was. Dr. Celine, I know that a lot of your research is more recent and really looking at the hope and the progress and what is possible. So we've had the then, and now let's go to the now.
Well, let's go to some of the now. Let me first provide a quick disclaimer that everything that I will share today comes from 3 decades of my research, my work, my living in Rwanda, my traveling extensively through East Africa, and my interactions with Rwandans abroad, both at home and abroad. And I'll start there. In 2012, I flew to Boston. It was new to me. It was Rwanda Day. I'd never heard of it. But I was getting ready to go live in Rwanda for several months. And some of the things I was reading in my research on Rwanda sounded good, but I hadn't experienced them yet. And as a researcher, you always have a bit of, you know, apprehension. Am I really going to find, or how can I find what people tell me I should be finding? And is there a way to measure? Is there a way to... But I thought, you know, let me first start building a network, and what but a better way to do than to go to Rwanda Day in Boston in 2012. Rwanda Day is held in different parts of the US and different parts of the world in different years. And there, a couple of the things that I witnessed just completely blew my mind. The first thing was that there were 3 categories. There were Rwandans, friends of Rwanda, and actual government officials there who were all expected to be sitting in the room and working during the Q&A. And I thought, well, that's something different. I mean, I'm French. I've traveled extensively throughout Europe, done a lot of research on democratization, and I had never seen an event like that. And all of the official speeches go by. It's finally the Q&A. And I see the president gesturing to a lady to the side. I'm assuming, I don't know who that is, but it might be his assistant. She brings a binder and a pen, and I'm thinking, the woman is going to come take notes. Was I wrong? She handed President Kagame the binder, the pen, and for the whole 2.5 hours of the Q&A, he took notes, but he didn't just take notes of every question for him. Anyone in the audience could get a microphone and could ask a question. Some of the questions were tough. And if the person in the audience didn't know who they were giving the question to, then it would get addressed. And the ambassador at the time, Ambassador Kimonyo, would say, this is a question we can help, or the Minister of Education is here, or the Minister of Commerce, of Foreign Affairs is here. And what was being written down is this person or that person or this ministry is going to take care of things. And trust me, things happened. And so that set up for my trip, just a few months later, going to live in Rwanda. And I thought, I'm going to be interviewing people at all kinds of different levels. And again, something very different from any of the officials I had ever interviewed. I would come to an office, and the person wasn't about to tell me what they wanted to tell me. They would always ask me, what did I need for the research? What's important to me? And it's like, you're the minister, don't you want to just tell me whatever is your, official line? And they would say to me, well, there is no official line. There is what's useful to you. Don't you report to, to a university, to a conference, to what do you want to know? And I remember talking with the Minister of Education at the time and telling me, what do you think is the most important part that you've changed for the education of young Rwandans? And he said to me something that I was completely not expecting. He said, we're now able to give a cup of milk a day per child. And we did this with 3 other ministries, and it's because we coordinated and because we cared that now the children can learn. And I thought, in most of the countries, where I've lived, we still don't get the point that if you don't feed the kids, that if they get to school, some of my friends, teachers in San Antonio, tell me one of their biggest expense among the, beyond supplies, is bringing food so that on Monday morning they can feed the kids who didn't have enough food over the weekend. So that said something very different. But then you think, well, they knew I was coming to visit. I need to dig deeper, right? I need to go and interview people who are not officials. I need to interview friends, Rwandans I meet at the cafes, Rwandans I meet walking around the neighborhood. And I met this young lady who was currently unemployed and started helping me as a guide. And I asked her, had she worked before? And she said, oh yeah, I did an internship with the Ombudsman's office. Oh, I'm intrigued. And for those of you who are not familiar with an ombudsman's office, it's an office that you usually go to when you have a qualm or a problem with a government agency. And they'll help review. And so I asked her, I said, well, what did you do? What does the ombudsman's office do in Rwanda? And she said, well, anyone, whether they're asking for a permit to build a house, or they want to start a new business, or they think their taxes are too high, and they think something was estimated wrongly, comes to us, explains what their problem is. And I said, well, then how do you work on solutions? And she said, the most important rule is we don't usurp the authority of other agencies. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, for example, if the city of Kigali did not give a permit to build a home in the 3rd district, we're not going to go to the city and say, you know, we reviewed the case, we think you should have been giving the permit, give the permit. She said, no, we're going to interview the person extensively, get all the information. Then we'll go to the city of Kigali, we'll ask them what was their process, how they came, and then we'll ask them if they're comfortable with us explaining their answer to the person for why they didn't get a result. Oh, you're going to go back to the person and tell them why you got that result? Well, maybe we need to review that a little further. And sometimes they would review it further and they would agree to give a permit, and they would say, no, we've reviewed it further, and now we're ready for you to give our explanation for a no. And I thought, that is beyond anything that I've ever noticed. And the third piece was traveling throughout East Africa. I was teaching a couple guest lectures at Catholic University of East Africa in Karen, Nairobi. And I was talking to political science students. This is 2013. They're in the middle of a very big, challenging election in, in Kenya. And when one of the students figured out that I was going right after Kenya to Rwanda, and the student said to me, you know, we wish we were like Rwanda. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we can see from our friends, because they have social media and they talk to each other, we can see from our friends that their young people can come to the table, can participate in political parties, are asked to be in different of the groups. And we wished that we mattered as young people as much in our country too. And again, those were very, very unexpected, right? Finally, I want to end here, and we'll come back to other things, but we are honoring Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the things that had been asked a few years ago was that Martin Luther King Jr. Day would not be a day off, but a day on. Rwandans get it. The 3rd Saturday of every month, the entire community comes together, and according to the local choices, the local commissions who decide, do we need to clear a field for a new school? Do we need to clean some streets where the rain ravaged some of the water easement? What is it that they need to do? And the whole community comes together and does it. And those are the kinds of things that have been really changing the way that when I am in Rwanda, I can see things that I never thought were even imaginable. Never mind seeing them being done over and over again and demonstrated by people who know. And when I asked, why do you do this? They say, it's my country, it's my future, it's my children. And so certainly, I'm very proud to be the godmother of Ian, a Rwandan student, because I know in his country, whether here in the US where he's born or in Rwanda, there are many opportunities that he'll be able to take advantage of. And that's really something that shows the hope and the strength of the way that Rwandans are coming together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Celine. That was just a beautiful picture of today. There's the then and now in the country, but there's also the then and now for the Rwandan diaspora here. And I'd love if you could take us through that progression.
Happy to. Thank you for that. And thank you for all of you that are watching, those that are here. I'm privileged to have this opportunity to be able to answer the then and now for the Rwandans who don't live in Rwanda. Unfortunately, many times when you think of the diaspora, you always start at 1994. But before that, there was a Rwandan community in many, many countries, including this United States of America. However, one of the things that, if I can zigzag into the future of that diaspora, is the Rwandans then had no country they were proud of. And what that did was our shredded dignity in whatever countries that had hosted us and taken us in, we were comfortable to the extent that we did not look towards Rwanda. We kind of looked at the survival heading to where opportunity was, whatever that was and whatever we could afford. In my case, I came here in 1982. When I was a kid, I thought I was the coolest guy around because I lived in Zimbabwe, which was Rhodesia then. I lived in Zambia. I lived in Uganda. I was born in the Congo. Cool kid, traveling all over Africa. I lived in Kenya as well. Little did I realize I was not just visiting those countries, or my parents living in those countries. Actually, I was called a Congolese when I was going to school. So you fast forward to 1982 when I'm in America, and there's a time, some of you may know, when the Rwandan embassy in Washington, D.C. at that time would send tickets to the few Rwandans. You could count them. There were less than 100 of us in this country at that time that we knew of. And they would give us tickets to go to Washington, D.C. They would make us do these animations in praise of the government then. That some of the individuals that came there, that's when there was an uprising like, no. We can't do this praising a country that cannot bring us in. And so at that one of those incidents when we went to Washington, D.C., I had found a way to get a Rwandan passport to come to this country without having lived in Rwanda. I'll leave it at that. However, when I went to the event at the Rwandan embassy, I gave them this expired Rwandan passport. And the diplomat there says to me, let me ask you, where are you from in Rwanda? I was like, well, you know, my parents came from the northern part of Rwanda, which was at that time called Ruhengeri. And he looks at me and says, do they have people that look like you in Rwanda? I did not quite get it then. I got it later. The point I'm trying to make here with their then, there were Rwandans in this country that left America for a better place in Canada because the government's reach here did not make us comfortable. So as we celebrate this week of MLK, MLK stood for those who did not have, I would say, hope. MLK spoke of one day a little girl, colorless or brown, white, hanging out. Today, Rwanda can say what we are proud of having achieved, but there was a time that was not possible to just be a Rwandan and be happy about that. But so as we look at that, there was something yearning of the Rwandans in the diaspora of a place they can say, I am Rwandan. But many of us that were here who could not say that, we're either Congolese, me, Ugandans, Burundi, Tanzania, Kenya, or another African country. So when you look at the then and the trajectory we've taken to today, we are a proud people. Just did not have a country to call home. But the country we ended up in, we participated as best we could, and today, I am proud to be able to say there is a vibrant Rwandan diaspora here that has freedom to go there and come back, And better yet, the Rwandan remittances, the monies they send to Rwanda that is trackable, is in hundreds of millions of dollars. That is the then, having come from the then to today. And the future is brighter from everything we have heard. I can tell you that these Rwandans who are here and those represented here, we are part of the nation building that we never had. Some of us never lived in Rwanda, but we are building our homeland. I'll leave it at that for now.
So in other words, there's a whole generation of Rwandan cool kids.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Dale, you know, we've talked about the then and now and sort of the larger countrywide aspect, but there's also kind of the then and now at a granular level of how people individually are able to develop so much more now. And you've really been involved in that quite a bit in helping with capacity building. So I'd love for you to talk about your work and the importance of capacity building and how that's happening in Rwanda.
Well, I'm one of those large group of global friends of Rwanda who have been drawn to Rwanda and inspired by it, by its resilience, by its vision, about the standards it set. I met President Kagame almost 15 years ago and became part of an advisory group of international friends. And the Rwandan leadership developed a strategy of reaching out around the world and building friendships with people across all sectors, from business and private sector to higher education, to healthcare, to religious organizations and churches. The Rwandans have done a remarkable job of building a global network of friends who care about them, who are passionate about them. And if you look around the world, there are very few countries who have been able to develop that kind of enthusiasm and support and friendship among people who had no historical connection to that country or to any country. When we first got involved with President Kagame and with the Rwandan leadership, they asked us as international friends to help accelerate the economic development of Rwanda. And at that time, it was Vision 2020. And today, it's Vision 2050. And a critical element of those visions is developing the high-capacity young talent that is going to be able to start and grow and develop internationally, globally competitive institutions. We created in 2007 a U.S. nonprofit called Bridge to Rwanda among a group of friends of Rwanda with 2 or 3 goals. And they were to continue to expand this global network of friends. It was to invite and encourage foreign direct investment into the country of Rwanda, whether you were a business person, you were a doctor, you were a higher education person. The idea was Rwanda was welcoming and inviting people to bring their skills, their network, their capital, their technology, to bring it and begin to set up operations in Rwanda. And at the same time, in a very complementary way, the goal was, can we create opportunities for the most talented, the most promising young Rwandans to go get scholarships to go study abroad, to live all over the world, and to bring those young talented people back to collaborate with all these foreign friends to be able to create globally competitive institutions across all of these sectors. And prior to 2005, 20 years ago, then, very few Rwandans were leaving and studying abroad. In fact, there were very few college graduates in Rwanda up until the 1990s. And after that, there was an explosion of higher education, and there was an explosion of programs that we have been able to see hundreds, if not thousands, of young Rwandans the last 15 years win full ride scholarships to the very best universities in the United States, North America, Western Europe, and many of those students have come back. Bridge to Rwanda, we not only have played a role, Our goal is to play a critical role in two of the critical transition in a young leader's life. One is when they go from high school, how do they get into the best university they can? The second transition is once they finish university, how do they launch a career and actually get the practical experience to lead organizations and to be entrepreneurs or to be innovators? And so we have a program in Rwanda. We have one of the largest employment agencies in career counseling that's free to any Rwandan who has studied abroad to come back. We have built a network of over 200 Rwandans who are very interested in getting talent into their organizations that have global perspective and global experiences. Today, we are looking at Vision 2050 and saying that has got to grow bigger. The shift has been not only to be able to send students to the best universities, but in speaking of Vision 2050, President Kagame said, one of our dreams is to give our children access to world-class education right here at home. And today, there are dozen universities in Rwanda that have been created by international organizations for the benefit of the entire continent of Africa. And our goal is to help work with all of those institutions in Rwanda, in Africa, and around the world to come up with the talent that's going to help Rwanda achieve the goals it wants to achieve by 2050.
You know, this issue of capacity building is so amazing, and to see the universities. I think Carnegie has
Mellon.
a university. There's several others. It's really extraordinary. Thank you so much for the work you do. Dr. Cherry, I think that, you know, from reading and hearing you talk, I think of you as the go-to person for linkages, that if you want to link up something of Rwanda and the U.S., culture, arts, sister cities, it doesn't matter, you're the go-to person. So talk to us about how those linkages have changed, the then and now of those linkages, and how it's really helped to develop the Rwanda that we see today.
If I may, I'll go to the podium.
Oh, sure. And I think you have some slides to show us too. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here and being asked to be here, and I just really wanted to share some experiences that I think really speaks to how we work together as a community, both here in America and in Rwanda, and it takes both of us working together to pull off some of the amazing things that we've pulled off over the years. When I ask myself today, how did we do this? The grace of God. So this first slide, it really was the three areas that I wanted to concentrate in, which was the university partnerships and the sister city programs, and it looks upside down for some reason. Well, put your glasses on. Okay, logistics and just other opportunities to provide some services in Rwanda. So we started with the California State University system and in Pomona, California, because of really just meeting a Rwandan who was pretty much stranded in Michigan, and it was right during the genocide, and then right afterwards, and then when he was going to come to California to visit, I called Washington, D.C., the embassy, and Dr. Joseph Mutavova answered the phone, and I said, you know, I have this friend coming to visit, and you probably don't know him. He said, well, we know everybody because the Rwandan community is pretty small in America. And so he put me in touch with Dr. Don Bell, who was Vice President for Technology at Cal Poly, and Don Bell made arrangements to invite the president of the Rwanda community in California, Emmanuel Morkezi, and then he invited Louis Munokazi, and then we just emerged together on the campus when Celestin came to figure out what can we do in response to what has happened in this country. And me being a person that just can't say, oh, that's terrible, it's like, this is a call to action. And so we engaged, like I said, Cal Poly, and began to bring students from Rwanda there to get their degrees. And the reason that I wanted to mention the other 23 campuses, because we realized one university was just not enough to try to help meet the needs in Rwanda. And then when I moved from California to Nashville, Tennessee, I met friends and colleagues at Lipscomb University, and we began to engage them. We worked with the KISS, the Kigali Institute of Science and Technology, and the University of Rwanda now. So this is really a then and now story. And under Sister Cities, we worked with, we started with the first one that we developed for Rwanda, which was San Bernardino, California. We're talking to Nashville and Bahati. I don't know if he's in the audience yet. I met the Rwandan community in Nashville because I realized that I cannot do this alone. I need the support of the community. And wherever you're at, I hope you become engaged with your sister cities, even if they don't develop Rwanda as a sister city. It's just important to know how these sister city programs operate. And then currently, I contacted a friend who I've known for 20 plus years because we worked together on public health issues throughout California. She was the Northern California rep. I was the Southern California rep. And her name is Aziza Davis Goins. And she is now, and has been for a while, the president of the Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce. And when I was contacted by the embassy that there's an interest in developing other sister cities, I contacted my friend Aziza. And I said, would you talk to the mayor of Sacramento about Kigali being a sister city? And she said, well, I sit on his board of directors for his foundation. And she asked him, and he said yes. And so a week ago Saturday, the ambassador and Aziza and the mayor and a representative from Sister Cities International, they met and agreed and developed some strategies, and now we're on board to develop Sacramento, California as the next sister city. So I'll go through these other slides very quickly. The reason I'm highlighting Lipscomb University, because my esteemed colleague who represents Lipscomb University in this wonderful partnership that we're developing for Rwanda is in the audience, Dr. Norma Burgess. And I thank her for coming with me. I talked her into it, and she just said yes immediately. So this slide represents our first group of students who came so many years ago, and they're back in Rwanda graduating, but the one in the black shirt at the top, Claire, is my daughter. She stayed with me, and she was the youngest, and I go, she's too young to go to a university. And so her and my daughter, Catherine, at the bottom next to me, had the exact same birthday, March the 8th, same year. And I go, this is a godsend, so this one is mine. She now lives in Minnesota. And this is Christine Umatoni's graduation. She came and got her MBA. Dr. Don Bell to my right, and Ambassador Cesar Barrow, when he was the ambassador, attended the graduation, and the dean of the business school. So that's Christine at the top, and she's now with UN Development Program. And Mary Eugenie on the right, sitting next to my daughter, Catherine, at Christine's graduation, also got her MBA the following year and returned to Rwanda in the Ministry of Finance. This is a very interesting story. I call this my friends, oh my friends. They know when I'm coming about Rwanda, they got to go to work.
Or somebody will come and tell me. But in the meantime, you know, when you think about the then and now, one of the things that happens in a country when they have had something that is so traumatic is that no one has any trust anymore. And this issue of justice, I would love if you can talk about how do you build that when you have so little trust? You have, a population that is so traumatized. How do you build that trust and justice?
Right. So in moments of crisis, especially when you have one side of the population who's been wronged severely to the levels indescribable, the only thing you want is some kind of closure. You need to be able to have your questions answered. And so, because we're also speaking of a context here, then, there was 120,000 genocide ex-prisoners in the penitentiary facilities in the wake of the genocide. That's a large population in the prison cells of Rwanda. And those facilities had been built with the capacity to house no more than 20,000 people. And again, remember also that in this context, there was no national reserves because it had been depleted by remnants of the genocidaire government. The state didn't have any power, nothing, not any economic wherewithal, capacity. No laws were in place that were actually designed to prosecute the crimes of this nature. There were no judges, no prosecutors, no lawyers, no professors to train a new generation of members of the legal system. Most of them had been killed in the genocide, so there was nothing. And those were major crimes, presumed genocide criminals to try. You also had over 1.2 million genocide-related crimes. Those were subsidiary, minor, not major crime cases to be tried. That too had to be, again, adjudicated here. Experts actually posited that if Rwanda had chosen the traditional legal system to try these cases, it would have taken 250 years. But here again, we see the ingenuity and the creative force in Rwandans' resolve to troubleshoot some of the most aching problems in the quagmire of situations. Just searching inwardly to try to troubleshoot the problem that otherwise seems in appearance by human logic impossible. There's no other country in living memory, none, that has prosecuted and brought to complete trial over 100,000 most egregious crime cases in a matter of 10 years. It has never existed anywhere within the memory. But because justice in the situation meant also more than simply giving victims some cathartic feelings again, it wasn't meant to procure a sense of relief. You just feel when someone who has wronged you is finally pronounced guilty. These were, the justice in this sense meant also to expand and build union across those sensibilities. And actually, it was a justice that was reconciliatory. It was a restorative justice. It wasn't the traditional justice that actually is divisive, that creates a wall between the two categories. But then you also have Gacaca emerge as another homegrown, internal, rooted into traditions of Rwandans, and then Gacaca making up a total of 12,000 community-based courts, and within 10 years, more than that 1.2 million cases were also adjudicated and closed. Again, another first, because there's nowhere in the history of the world such thing has been implemented with success. So really, that's more or less the picture in terms of the journey of building reconciliation, but really without hurting so much the question of justice.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Dr. Celine, your work right now is on transforming individual identity through unity.
Yeah,
Please.
let me actually, connect this to the building trust and this culture of accountability, but also of definitely leading by example. I'll give just three short images. I arrived in Kigali, and I hadn't been able yet, this was 2013, to bring some Rwandan francs. So I knew very quickly, even though I had some Kenyan shillings, of course I had US dollars, that I would need to change, to change some of the money. And staying with our friends, one of my friends says, hey, Paul has a business, he loves to purchase at a good rate. US dollars, you have $100 bills, would you exchange them with him? I said, sure. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm thinking, are we going to see Paul? And my friend says, yeah, we'll go see Paul. 7 p.m., is Paul's business still open to change this money? I mean, it's getting dark. I'm not, I wouldn't go to an ATM in the US at night. I'm not sure I want to go change money in the business district in Kigali. I certainly didn't know I should. And at the time, my late husband was a professor of martial arts, so somebody who could have protected me, but I still didn't think that was a good idea. And so it's now 9 p.m. and I said to my friend, are we finally going to go see Paul? It's like, yeah, we'll go see Paul. We arrived in the business district. For those of you who've been in Kigali, it's primarily completely open storefront, right? They'll put down gates at night, but it's just, you just walk in. It's not just a door, it's just an, gaping opening. And we entered this beautiful store covered in magnificent, brilliant, engaging, warm fabrics. And I asked to see Paul, and I'm like, oh, Paul went home. Well, it is 9:30 now. And he said, but we know that you're coming. And I'm thinking, well, I want to change my money. Aren't we going to walk to the back room? And the guy's like, no, pulls out this bill counter and puts it on the counter that you can see walking from the street. And I'm thinking, oh, we're going to die. Like, this, we're changing $500. It's going to be over 300,000 Rwandan francs. And here I am going to walk around town with this money. This is not smart. And he just, very calmly goes through the process, counts, recounts, hands over. And the whole night I thought this was the end of me. We're going to get robbed. And nothing happened. Fast forward to the last day, I accidentally forgot, because I received several books, and you know how we are academics, we hold on to books like they're pure gold. So I left my brand new camera with every single SIM card of every single photo for the 5 months in East Africa. And went back to my room, so excited about the book that I had that was signed, and didn't realize that my husband, who thought I had the camera, didn't bring the camera. And suddenly there's a knock on the door. We're at the hotel. We were downstairs at the restaurant where I had met the person who gave the book. And somebody hands over to me the camera, and I'm like, well, turning to my late husband, did you leave the camera downstairs? Because I wasn't sure. I didn't think we had left the camera. And before he could look or respond, the man just ran away. He brought back my camera that's worth more than 2 years of his salary and didn't even wait for a tip. That's the kind of security. I'll leave you with this last one, because I did ask some tough questions from some tough ministers. Went to see the Minister of Defense at the Rwandan Pentagon. Very tough security to get in, very tough protocol to get in. And several people are there in the room with us. And I said to him, look, one of the things that looks bad for Rwanda is that all the human rights organizations are saying you have military in uniform on the streets, you don't look like a democracy, it makes you look like a dictatorship. First, you should have seen everybody shrinking in their seat like, this woman is out of her mind, talking to the Minister of Defense that way. But he looked at me and he said, Dr. Celine, have you felt safe in Kigali for the past few months? I said, yes. He said, didn't you ever ask of one of the military officer for directions? I said, yes, actually one night I had to because I didn't know which way to go. He said, we as Rwandans, we're in a place that is so small and cut by so many roads going into the Congo, into Tanzania, into Uganda, that we have to have safe streets. And our people feel safer when we have military uniforms on the streets. And so we keep them on the streets. I certainly couldn't deny that he had the right answer. I felt safe.
You know, that relates back again to building the trust with the military, with the police, with all these forces. Really interesting stories. They are telling us that we have very, very little time left. So now I'm going to have to be really strict with the 3 that are left. And I'm going to try to push for more time. We are going to be 1 minute each. I have a timer here. I am going to be able to see. And I really apologize. There was so much that we got into, and I apologize that we can't take questions. On the diaspora has really been the spark for so many business opportunities. What are the things that the diaspora are doing that are really helping with building the new Rwanda? And I am starting to time you now.
One of the things that we are privileged to do is have the partnerships that Dr. Cherry alluded to. And we have more than 20 communities around the country. And one of the objectives that we are always admonished to do is build relationships locally so that people can know what we are all about. And that is how the Dales, the Dr. Cherries, Dr. Celine, and others are able to go and establish themselves in Rwanda, whether it's partnership or they take what they have, because Rwanda is a safe place to make investments. And those who go there, they get returns by seeing how well the country is developed, even though there was a time that we did not know what tomorrow held. And today, visit Rwanda. You'll love it, and you'll be changed as well.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Dale, we're talking about then and now. I wonder if you can give us a little look into the future. You are on the Presidential Advisory Council for the Rwandan president. Where are we looking in the future? What's the then, now, and tomorrow?
Well, Vision 2050 says that we're going to be a high-income nation in the next 30 years. The growth rate needs to be 10% plus a year. Rwanda before the pandemic was hitting over 10%. We assume that'll happen, and I think nurturing these high-capacity young talent that we need, and also bringing in, we have a vision at Bridge to Rwanda to build a bridge to Rwanda that transforms lives at both ends. And what we found is that when we bring our friends from the United States to Rwanda and they see and are inspired and they're given the opportunity to participate and to invest and to help, their lives are transformed. And I think Rwanda has developed a momentum over the last 20 years that will cause more and more people to be attracted to come and to participate in Rwanda's building.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Cherry, you have done so many things with linkages, and I'm so impressed when I listen to the things, how everything, it's like your brain is just buzzing with, oh, I can connect this with this and this and this and this, and all the things that you have done in that way of connecting. There are so many people who want to help, to do things. What would you say to people who want to do things to help Rwanda? What advice do you give?
I think it's extremely important that people come from a position of their natural being, their natural habitat. For instance, I give this example. I was meeting with some Rwandan friends, new community that I've discovered that the embassy really introduced me to. in Nashville. And as I met with some of them, I realized that people have come with incredible talents. The nurses, the pharmacy techs. And so I then engaged, and more, doctors or whatever. So when I engaged Dr. Burgess at Lipscomb, I asked her to ask Dr. Birdsong, who is the Director of Health Sciences, to help me to navigate curriculums to help the diaspora who already have talents but need to be able to work in these fields, and what kinds of things can we help them to do to navigate the licensing process or to have some income as they're having to work in hospitals or pharmacies for their internship practice. So it's just real now learning from mistakes from the past of how to systematically deal with people with what their real needs are.
And I think one of the things that's the most important of Rwanda owns its own development. And so the Rwandan diaspora also is ownership of that development. And I love when you and Yahoo first met when we were at the hotel earlier, and you immediately were like, I know your relative. So really just a great synergy. We had high hopes of being able to have audience questions from Facebook, but unfortunately the venue has another event, and so we have to go. But thank you so much, everybody, my panelists, Ambassador, the embassy, this has really just been fabulous. I think, so I think that we are going, because we did have another panelist, Dr. Margie Ensign, who is the president of the American University in Nigeria, a private university based on the U.S. model of university education. And she is now the president of Dickinson College. She co-authored Rwanda History and Hope. And I know she's been a very long-term friend of Rwanda. She was going to be on the panel, and in her many hats, she had to be at the University of Nigeria, but she has sent us a short video. So we'll see that, and then we will end.
Good afternoon or evening to all of the participants in the very important conference in San Antonio, Texas, Rwanda, then and now, Milestones in Rebirth and Growth. Ambassador Mukutavana, other speakers, panelists, participants, I wish I could be with you today to talk about what I believe is one of the most important topics that we could be discussing, and that is the progress in Rwanda since 1994, since the genocide against the Tutsi. So let's go back to 1994, to the context. There was no nation. Over 1 million people were killed. All of the country's key sectors were destroyed. The justice sector, the economy, health, education, agriculture. Infrastructure was decimated. Social cohesion destroyed. Genocide perpetrators were in the country, and trust and hope were destroyed. We must ask ourselves the question then, how is it in 2022, in all of those sectors, in the economy, in gender, in education, in health, in justice, in national and local governance, how is it possible that such tremendous progress has been made? I think it's the key issue that we should be discussing now when we talk about Rwanda. Any transformation, any nation building anywhere in the world requires 3 things. It requires a vision for a better future. It requires a clear plan for implementing that vision, and it requires a method for monitoring progress towards that vision. All of this has happened in Rwanda since 1994. The visions go back to the beginning, whether it's the economic development and poverty reduction strategies, whether it was Vision 2020 that said Rwanda will be a middle-income country by 2020. People questioned that vision, but of course it was the right one. And now, of course, all of the national development plans. But a vision is never enough. You have to have a plan to make sure you reach that vision, and you have to have a way of monitoring to make sure you're on the right path. I'd like to talk briefly about how I believe Rwanda has done this with its homegrown solutions, as they're called. These are trademark approaches to social and economic development that build on the history and culture of Rwanda. And there are many, for those of you who know Rwanda. Umuganda, where people come together in common purpose to work towards an objective. Community work. Abunzi, the mediation committees. Irinki responds to childhood malnutrition with cows for every family. The two that I think have been most important in building and leading to this progress are Ubudehi and Imihigo. Ubudehi means, as I understand from the Kinyarwanda, collective action, support to solve problems, and Imihigo, which started out as a contest in traditional times, now is a contract that has led to performance-based governance. Before I talk about that, let's just all be very clear about what kind of progress we see now in Rwanda. Rapid economic growth and poverty reduction, gender equity, the highest proportion of women in parliament of any country in the world. We should all be cheering that achievement. Education, very innovative uses of information technology, a tolerance-based curriculum, and a merit-based system that has helped heal the nation. In health, tremendous progress. 95% of the population has access to insurance, the highest rates of immunization on the continent, rapid declines in infant and child mortality, and very innovative uses of cell phones and drones to both deliver medicines and to monitor. And then, of course, the good governance, which is these homegrown solutions. 1 million people have been lifted out of poverty in Rwanda. 1 million people since 2006. Very rapid economic growth that's facilitated this from 2006 till last year, when of course COVID hit and affected everyone. For many years, Rwanda has been one of the most improved countries and most successful countries in Africa in doing business. And this is based on improvements in how easy it is to start a business, to enforce contracts, and with tax administration. Food security has increased, and as I said, 61.3% of female representation in Rwanda is the highest in the world, up from 26% in 2000. And gender parity has been reached at the primary school level. Once again, I just want to remind you, if you're curious about this data, this isn't me talking, this is the World Bank. Go to the World Bank's country profile for Rwanda, and this is what they show. Life expectancy in 1990, before the genocide against the Tutsi, was 33 years old. Right now, in 2020, it's 69. That's extraordinary progress. Child mortality, which is under 5 mortality, went from 179 per thousand in 2000 to 34 in 2020. And percentage of under 5 children who are underweight, which is stunting. And if you know this literature, you know if a child is stunted, they will never be able to live up to their full cognitive potential. It was 20.3% in 2000 and 7.7% last year. Again, go to the World Bank country profile to review this data yourself. Progress has been made, enormous progress, and the world does not know enough about it or know how it happened. There are many reasons we can go to, I think, to explain this. The vision was critically important. But Ubudehi, I believe, is critically important, because it involves local people in determining where they are, what their needs are to pull themselves out of poverty. As I said, it's based on a traditional, a cultural process in Rwanda that was used in agriculture to support each other during planting and land cultivation. Now it's used when communities come together to literally map out, do a social mapping process to determine the level of poverty and their needs in education and healthcare. I had the great privilege of seeing one of the first examples of Ubudehi in the very early 2000s and how communities map what resources they have on a big piece of cloth that leads to them their determination of their local needs. This leads then to making sure those needs are met. How has that happened? What has been the basis, the foundation for this progress? I believe it's Imihigo. So from this social mapping process where local people, poor people themselves, determine their level of poverty and their needs and education and health and agriculture to pull themselves up.
A different story. The first thing that was let go by the government was to criminalize revenge killing. Believe me, I come from a place I lost 70 people of my family through genocide. If I had met somebody and I know who killed my parents, on a personal basis, if I had met that person and I was unhinged and I was going to say, maybe this is a time to revenge, I could have done it. But we had a mechanism of saying we are trying to build a country, chaff and grain alike, mix them, and come up with a society where people can be living together, be able to also to do the, so we can't allow anything to come and disturb that unity that we have achieved at a high cost. The other thing maybe I can put out there for you to start reflecting upon. Rwanda by all purposes is 27 years old, 27. We're dead as a country. So, and we had the priorities. The first was peace and security for people to feel safe that a machete want to come and kill you. So we have been making all these milestones that we have been talking about, but we are still going. And the other thing too, we are all here really celebrating Martin Luther King. While he was alive, no one understood him, or people took his ideology, they understood him, but many people verified what he was trying to do. But now we are here and looking, and we are living under his star. We are trying to hear his views because we know he got it. So what I can tell you is a country, we are not a perfect country. Someone was asking about the president, and maybe I'll take this quick opportunity to respond as well. You are saying, is he preparing people because he has been there? Let me tell you, again, the preparation is what we have been talking about. All Rwandans, from villages to high end. If you look at all the young people who are in the government now, all people, the one who is spearheading our, for instance, our economic development is the women. All the major ministries. All this stuff is the preparation to have people who are capable to lead and to continue the trajectory. And the connection with the young people, especially because our countries are young people. Also to look and see where we are going. But again, this was a time where Rwandans themselves, there was a referendum. There were millions of petitions asking President Kagame to remain, because during that particular time we didn't feel that it was time for him to go. And any country can do it based upon their context. President Roosevelt stayed in office until he died after 4 terms. It was because during that particular time for the United States, President Roosevelt, who was able to deal with the Depression, and then also took the country through World War II, was there. Now we are talking about a country when they were saying, there was talking about lack of people who are educated. By the way, at independence, Rwanda had 1 graduate. It's not every day you are going to get an amazing leader who can take our country through this. And if Rwanda says, we want that person in this particular sector and in the context we live in, we'll keep him. It's about Rwanda. It's about what Rwanda wants. It's not President Kagame who said, I want to stay in office. Believe me, he's not. We got tons of petitions, and if you go and look, for instance, when we extended the 3rd mandate, we had to go through all the instances. Those ones, going to Parliament, going to the Supreme Court, all those stuff had to be taken. And we had to convince him we needed him. Because he would need some kind of, So what I'm saying is, President Kagame is not there because he wants to. You can characterize him any way you want. When you talk about the park, like a Presidential Advisory Council, these are people coming from all over the world, the best minds, who have been, also advising him but also being with Rwandan people on a daily basis within what people were talking about, to be able to say, we as Rwandans will get ourselves here. And then I don't need to go too far to study the geopolitical situation in our region. You know, you don't give away a winning team because the world is saying, no, we don't want that guy. The Rwandan people want that guy. And this is one of the things that maybe I can finish with. Other people can add whatever they want. President Kagame is there because Rwandan people want President Kagame. And they want him because of what he has done for them. This is the time when you can stand, when we are proud, like what the diaspora was saying. I've heard people say, oh, diaspora is working for Kagame. These are independent people. Some of them are high-end CEOs of their own company here in the United States. But you always attach yourself to a country, they have their relatives back home, and they want to see that country to develop and to continue the trajectory we are in. And again, as I said, the road to equality, the road to justice, the road to anything is a wrong road for anybody, for any country. I'm not saying you are there yet, but you are in a good area to reach that perspective. So I thank you, and I think I've spoken too much. Maybe somebody else could have added whatever they could add, but there was a question I didn't hear from Professor Israel. I'm so sorry, I couldn't hear very well. Maybe it's my ears, if you want to.
Is that correct?
Why would we want to spy in a classroom? If we wanted anything bad against Rwanda, we can hear on Twitter anywhere. Why would we want to send anybody? What? So someone came and spy. That spy, he doesn't know how to spy if he were able to determine. I just would like really to know, for me.
How do you know that this was
Someone
a
is a spy.
I'm curious how you even know that.
Invited. Usually. Okay. So maybe I'm not here to argue, but what I would say about this is this. What?
Okay, wait a minute. We're not just having unfortunately, we have the venue that is saying time. So we can't just take more questions. You should have raised your hand earlier. I'm sorry. But I think that we are really, you've really been telling me for quite a while.
Maybe what I can say is that really, again, Rwanda and our government and any other people in Rwanda, like the people who have presented here, we want to partnership. We want learning from each other. We grow with each other. And whatever we have been able to achieve is because of partnerships and valid partnerships, whether they are from school, whether from government, countries, but also even businesses and so on and so forth. So, do we make mistakes when we do things? Yeah, of course. There's no country in the world that doesn't make any mistake. But to come here and to say that as a government you are interested in spying in the classroom, that's really beyond what I can say for me. But the other thing is, if someone was there and you were spying, you were not going to see who they were. What? So if he was there, maybe by, but let me tell you, this whole time we have used Zoom, all of us, I think because of working remotely. When usually you have a Zoom where you don't want anybody to go in, it belongs to you to ensure that is a closed Zoom. But if the Zoom is, if anyone, the name was there from what I hear. If someone wanted to spy, really, am I going to send somebody whose name is being seen on a Zoom? What I'm saying, the onus was on you to ensure that your Zoom was not readily available, because for all of us, we do it. You know, I mean, we work on Zoom. Huh? No, it was afterwards. Let me tell you.
I'm sorry, we're really getting.
Yeah, so thank you so much,
The
but
venue, they're being really, really strict about the time. Maybe this is something that you can have a dialogue about.
There's no dialogue on that, because really, quite frankly, it's a non-issue. It should be a non-issue. So for me, what
You've
I can
asked,
say,
you've heard the answer.
what I
So-
can say is that I thank the people who have organized this, the Dream Week, and if, for instance, this has been brought to my attention, okay? Me. So anyway, we are not here really to see what was not well done. If there was any harm done, by anybody, this is something I would apologize for. But what I'm saying is, we have a protocol on how we do things. We have ways, we have a system. So, and what I can tell you, this I think pretty much could, if this is the only issue, then we need to revise how things are done, or maybe on Zoom or whatever, but what I'm saying is, let's not argue about the Zoom, about what was done. Let's see how our countries and our people could continue to advance by following one of the greatest men in life, and the value that Martin Luther King was able to promote. And we are learning from that, we are continuing on that journey. But let me take this opportunity to thank all of you who have shared what you know about Rwanda.
Thank you, everyone. And with that, we are going to close the session. Thank you all for coming. For those of you who joined us online, thank you for being with us. Ambassador, the embassy, thank you so much for having this opportunity to be able to share Rwanda